All right, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you could be here. We have I hope, a rather brief presentations today, focusing on the CV and the cover letter for teaching jobs in higher ed. So I'm going to go through the material rather quickly, but that's because if you note in the navigation for your webinar, there are two handouts. So I would say your first step here is go ahead and download those two handouts, and you might like to follow along as we go through, because essentially that's what we're going to do. We're going to go from top to bottom. We're going to talk about principles of both documents. We're going to talk about formatting, and we're going to talk about the content itself. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Oops, we're going to start off with the principles for the CV. And so there are lots of good guidelines out there, and I'm going to send a link to this presentation at the end of our webinar. So those two underlined bits that are highlighted with the lightning bolt, those are links that CAA has guidelines for your CV. Also, Karen Kelsky, you might know her from The Professor is In. She has excellent recommendations and guidelines on her website, her free blog, which has a ton of great resources. I'll talk about that later. But the guiding idea for all of this is that you want to put the most relevant info for the job you're applying to higher up in your CV. I've combined the CAA principles with those from Karen Kelsky, and together, hopefully it gets that message across that you've got to tailor the CV and the content has to be rearranged according to the job you're applying for. All right, CV formatting, 1-inch margins, 12-point font, and you might hear other advice about this, but 12-point font is very readable. And this is important because when you apply to an academic teaching job, you're going to be sending your materials to a diverse group of readers. The committee is often a range of ages and backgrounds, and so, or you hope that they're a diverse range of backgrounds. It isn't always the case, but you can almost guarantee there's going to be a range of ages on that committee, and that means some people are going to be able to read tiny text and others it's going to be a struggle. You never, ever, ever want your materials to be a struggle for anyone, so 12-point minimum. Single spaced, and the reason for that is because we're going to use spacing or returns, enters, to create a lot of ease of visual flow throughout your document. So that single spaced will help crunch things together where they need to be and allow for space where you want it to be. Headings must be bold. They should be all caps so that they really pop and they're easy to read. Subheadings you can put in bold only, not caps, and that way already you're starting to create a sense of visual hierarchy in your CV. Don't use italics unless it's for an exhibition title, a book title, a journal title. Try to limit that because actually italics are a little bit harder to read. So we limit their use to just those types of listings. And also you'll want to put 1 or 2 full returns or blank lines before each new heading. Again, this is going to create visual contrast. It's going to give you hierarchy within the document, and that means that your reader is going to be able to move through that really fast. And that's what we want. We want them to glean everything that's wonderful about you in moments, in sheer moments, because really they don't spend that much time on your documents. Always do reverse or descending chronological order. So you're starting with most recent to oldest listing, no matter what you're doing on, no matter which heading you're working under. You'll put 1 return or blank line between the heading and its first entry, because again, that's going to create a buffer of white space around your heading, and it's going to pop and you're going to be able to read with a lot of speed. Everything's left justified in the CV. That means everything's lined up along that left side of your document. No bullet points. Bullets are something that we recognize from business resumes, and that is not what a CV is. And people in academia have been, it's been ingrained, it's part of their culture to look for these types of formatting. That's why we list them out here for you. Um, and avoid in general like a halfway heading when you have to split up a chunk that says XXX or something 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 continued, because every time you edit your CV, which hopefully will be frequently, it's a good idea to have a goal of adding an element to your CV once a month. You won't always hit that goal, but it's a good target so that you land in a good with regular updates is your goal. So that's why you don't put XXX continued for a heading. Just let it flow, let it break naturally as you add elements to your CV. Try to avoid boxes on your CV. Again, this becomes tricky with formatting. It's not worth your bother. Just use the spaces, those returns, those blank lines to create the hierarchy in your document. There should always be a year for every element on your CV. It should be left justified. You want to use your tab or spaces to have that year floating on the left, and then the content that's listed next to it with at least one tab between the year and the content. And again, what does that do? It creates ease of reading, which is what you want. You want them to be able to skim your pages so fast so that they know exactly why you're excellent. There should be no narrative verbiage anywhere. Your CV is a list. It is not, I know it's popular on business CVs to put like the name of your job, where you were, and then a little paragraph or a series of bullets that describe what you did on the job. That is not what you do for an academic CV. And that's because everybody's so familiar with the roles in academia that there is no such narrative needed. We know what assistant professor means. We know what a teaching assistant is. We know what a visiting professor is. So like we use all of this very, very sparingly because everybody's familiar with what all of these terms mean. Do not describe duties under the courses that you've taught. That's not necessary. No explanation of grant, no explanation of fellowship necessary. We all know what these words mean, and so you don't have to go into detail about them. And certainly no personal stories. We don't need a narrative of your life in your CV. It would be inappropriate in this document. So what material goes in the CV? Well, it always starts with a heading, and the heading is pretty uniform. It might look a little different on some people's CVs versus others, but in reality, the content is pretty uniform, and it should be, because again, it's all about speed. So at the top of your CV, I recommend centered because the whole rest of the document is left justified. So if you're going with centered, it'll create a visual difference so that your name is the highlight of that first page. Centered in 14 or 16 point font, so we're jumping up in size. You can even go larger if you want. The point is your name is the glowing headline of your first page of your CV. It can be bold, it can be uppercase, you can use large type, any combination of those just so that your name pops. You do need to put in tiny text the word curriculum vitae underneath your name. It labels the document. It makes it clear for the readers that, yes, indeed, this is your CV. It seems silly because we don't label any of the other documents, but it's just a tradition. It's what you do for your CV. Underneath that, you can include a date, especially if you're constantly updating your CV. I don't, but if you want to, I have seen that convention. And mailing address, you've got to give them a way to contact you. Be warned though, if you're going to put your CV on the internet, take the mailing address off. You don't want to give too much personal information online. So you might have a web-based version of your CV and then a physical or PDF version of your CV that you actually mail to employers. The mailing address, you can have, if you're at an institution, it's recommended that on one side at the top, you have the institution address, and right parallel to it, right across from it, is your personal mailing address. What this shows is if you're lucky enough to be at an institution, that you can highlight that you are currently at an institution. That gives you a bit of clout that you are currently employed at an institution. Then also you want to have with the address your email your phone number, and your website. These are necessary. You don't skip any of them. Again, if you're putting this on online, I would probably not put the phone number. I just think that that's opening yourself up to some challenges there. But certainly the email and certainly the URL need to be up there. All right, CV heading material. We just talked about phone number. We just talked about email. I actually recommend use a personal professional email for your email, because sometimes people retain, it's not often, but sometimes they retain these application materials because something about you sparked interest. And sometimes we move on from institutions. And if they're holding on to the only piece of contact information you gave was that institutional email, and if you've separated from that institution, they might have difficulty finding you, and you always want it to be super easy to follow up. So that's why I use, in my instance, I have ellen@ellenmueller.com. I recommend something like that. Or even if you're using a Gmail address, just make sure it's not like puppies and unicorns at Gmail. You want it to be professional sounding. All right, so content. There is an order to the content in the CV. Education is always first, no exceptions. It always has to go first. And there's examples here on how you list that with the year, the type of degree, the institution you got it from, and then if you want to put, what am I missing here? Oh, city and state, that's fine as well. So there's lots of examples, and this is the example on this slide here is actually in chronological order. You would start from study that didn't result in a degree to like a bachelor's. If you have, in this case, this person has 2 bachelors, and then an MFA. Or if you have a doctorate, that would go on even on top of the MFA. Other content. The next item that you really want to have is professional appointments. And if you don't have any, obviously you would omit that. But this goes immediately under education, because this again is that speed signal for your reader. So this would be contract positions, things like a tenure track position, an adjunct position, a full-time faculty position, postdoctoral if you're in the doctoral range. And what you want to do is give the institution, the department, your title, and the dates of employment. And this is important that you get it right. People pay attention to titles, unfortunately, and they each mean something slightly different. So really pay attention to your contract and make sure you are accurate. Don't invent things. Don't call yourself a professor at an institution if your title is something else. It's unfortunate and it's petty, but people pay attention to that. And if they catch you bending the truth or like stretching the truth, it might get you thrown right into the garbage can. So really pay attention to those details. Other content. Next up, if you have them, you want to follow up with awards, grants, fellowships. These are things that are peer reviewed, that you were selected out of many applicants and you were awarded these recognitions. And then also your exhibition record. And depending on the prestige of your awards, grants, and fellowships, or the prestige of your exhibition record, you might flip-flop these, and that's okay. You want to make that judgment call based on your accomplishments, not some sort of formula here. Publications could come next if you have any. Not a lot of artists have a lot of publications they are the author of, although sometimes they do. This is more frequent, I would say, with graphic designers might have publications that they've fully designed they want to feature on the CV. Bibliography, this is where people have written about you. So this would be reviews, this would be articles about your work, books where your work is mentioned, catalogs of exhibitions, radio, television interviews, all of that can go under your bibliography. And if you have commissions, everybody's different. Everybody works a little differently. So if you do a lot of commission work, get it on there, especially if it's impressive. You always want to put your strongest accomplishments higher up in the order of the CV. All right, lectures, presentations, workshops, any of these speaking engagements. get them on your CV. Keep track of that stuff. If you're invited to a class, even to just be like a little guest lecturer or a guest critiquer or something like that, that goes under speaking engagements. And there's other, I mean, you could do presentations, workshops, all of this can get lumped together under speaking engagements. Or if you're lucky enough and you have a lot of one kind or another kind, feel free to break that up into separate headings. That's completely fine. All of these things are great to put on your CV. Conference activity, if you get enough of these, I'd say 2 or more, break it out. Call that out, because if you're applying to an institution where you have lots of non-art and design people on the committee, the selection committee, they know this stuff. Conferences are real currency in the fields outside of art and design. So if you're able to call that out and you have a scientist on your selection committee, they're immediately going to raise an eyebrow and be like, oh, clearly this person is active in their field because I know what a conference is. They might not know very well what an exhibition is or some of the other things that artists and designers do, but they know conferences. So that's a real currency that you want to keep track of. And then there's an example right here on this slide of how you would list that: date, presentation title, what conference was it at. And then finally, we get to teaching experience. And this might feel a little counterintuitive. You're applying for a teaching job. Why wouldn't you bump that teaching experience all the way to the top? Well, academia has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder in terms of meritocracy. Research, or in our case as artists and designers, not publications, but exhibitions, well, and for graphic designers, occasionally publications as well. All of that holds a lot of clout. It shows that you are active in the field. And because of the hierarchy of prestige in academia, you have R1 research institutions, followed by regional research institutions, followed by small liberal arts colleges, sometimes called SLACs. And then eventually you get down to community colleges and other smaller institutions. Because research is always at the top of this hierarchy that we all subscribe to, teaching seems to be devalued a bit. So you don't want to take it off the CV, but it does occur a little bit lower on the CV because it's considered in some cases less pressing. So here is where we finally list courses under teaching experience. We don't list courses up at that professional experience heading that we talked about a while ago. All the classes get mentioned here under teaching experience. There's no need to mention course numbers. Nobody cares. Instead, you're going to list these by, perhaps I've seen people divide it up by institution. So you're just tracking your career trajectory. I've seen people divide this up by graduate courses you've taught and undergraduate courses. Some people divide it up by topic. So maybe you teach painting, sculpture, and drawing or something like that. You could divide it up that way. It really, you want to play to your strengths here. And you can change this based on the job you're applying to. So if the job listing calls out, we really need a painter with expertise in drawing as well, maybe that's how you order those in your teaching experience. You call out painting first, then the drawing. You follow their lead from the job application. If you have TA experience, it goes here. Teaching assistantship experience gets listed under this heading. And then no narrative is needed. You don't need to go out of your way to list duties or responsibilities here. Teaching experience is a heading about the list of classes. All right, other things that get listed on the CV: service to your profession. This would sometimes also be called national or international service. Departmental service or university service. This would be things like, have you served on a committee, or have you been serving on faculty senate, those kinds of things. And then also technical abilities. This can really make your CV stand out if you list all of the things you feel you're capable of teaching here, especially computer-related things. If there are certain softwares that you feel comfortable teaching, list them, get them under your technical abilities. Similarly, if you're applying, I'm thinking of like a sculpture position, really it's a good idea to list out the special skills that you feel very comfortable with. Let's say a school has a foundry and you're trained in how to use the foundry, put it on there. You want to highlight that stuff. Other content, do you belong to a collection, a public or a private collection? That's a great thing to have on your CV. References generally, and this is debated, but what I've been noticing over the past several years is you don't need to list your references on the CV unless the ad asks you to, because most applications happen online now. And so those application systems are going to ask you to enter reference information anyway. So I always say declutter the CV, get the references off of there, and then enter them into their system as they're asking you to. Again, white space is your friend on the CV. So if there's stuff you can eliminate off there that's not relevant to the job, it doesn't hurt to remove and let the eyes rest and consume the CV very quickly. All right. This is a very grumpy cat. And he's saying, what is never included on a teaching CV? There's no need to reference overseas travel, especially if it's just for pleasure. If you actually studied something over there, you might consider listing it under your education early in your career. As you progress as a scholar, that stuff gets taken off unless you actually earned a degree or a part of a degree. Career goals do not belong on a CV. That's sort of a remnant of a business resume. You would never put a header on your academic CV that says, these are my career goals. It's just not appropriate. And then just anything at all that you would see on a business resume, cut it. It doesn't belong on an academic CV. All right, taking a breather, cover letter principles. So if you have downloaded those two handouts, we're going to switch over to the cover letter. So in the cover letter, this is a tricky document, but this template that I've provided breaks it down into manageable chunks. In general, principles to follow are be specific. We don't care about your fluffy feelings about teaching and your love for doing so. That's not what the cover letter is for in general, because again, be reminded of the committee that is reviewing your work. This is fast. They don't have time. They need to find your highlights and move on. So in your cover letter, they already looked at your CV. You can safely assume that. What have you done? How is this applicant a good fit for our program? Those are the questions that the cover letter address. Explain why you're a strong candidate for this position, not generally. Nobody generally cares about what you're good at. Explain why you're the perfect fit for this application. So keep that in mind. So an example, when we say show, don't tell, and don't be squishy, don't be emotional, a common thing that you often see in a cover letter is, I am passionate about teaching. Everybody's passionate about teaching. We don't care. Instead, you can give specific examples that really make you stand out. So an example here, instead of saying, I am passionate about teaching, you can say, I use new technologies to create innovative small group discussion opportunities in my large introductory classes. And I use these technologies. They were later adapted by my colleague in our department. So what you've done with that simple statement is you've laid out very specific examples of what you do to be innovative in your classroom, and that they were recognized and used by somebody else. So in that short sentence, you have elaborated and painted a picture that's far more complex, far more compelling than simply saying, I am passionate about teaching. Another example that we have here is, I worked one-on-one with students on individual research projects leading to published articles. Ding, ding, ding. That has value in academia. Several students later nominated me for our campus's Best Undergraduate Teacher Award, which I won in 2011. So again, you say what you did and what did that result in. That's a far more powerful statement than simply a statement of passion. All right, Proofread. Oh my gosh, I can't emphasize. That's why this is one slide just by itself. You've got to proofread your documents. It's so embarrassing when you accidentally send out a letter or a CV or something that has markings for a different school on it to the school it's not intended to go to. Everybody's made that mistake, myself included. It's embarrassing. So you can avoid that by having a solid proofreading system. So this means you got to get a friend, you got to get a colleague, somebody who's going to be willing to comb through your documents for you, second set of eyes. All right, cover letter formatting. You need to be concise. The cover letter, the academic cover letter can never be more than 2 pages. It's not acceptable. They don't have time. Put it on your current institutional, letterhead. Because again, this curries favor. This shows that another institution has already endorsed you and you're looking for further opportunities. Now, if you're not working for an institution, don't fret. It's okay. You can put it on your own very subdued, simple personal letterhead. But if you are employed somewhere or you're a current graduate student who's looking to get on the market, you can use your institution's letterhead. That is completely okay to do, and you should, because it elevates your application. Just like the CV, everything is left justified. It's 12-point font. You want to make it easy to read. Minimum 3/4 inch margins. It's better to do 1 inch because having that white space around the document, it just makes everything much more readable. You're going to start with the date. You're going to have it fully written out just under the letterhead. And if you're following along on the handout, you can see this laid out on that template. You'll have a space under the date. You'll have the full mailing address of where you're sending this to, another space, and then a greeting. And this is key. If you're able to score the name of the chair of the search committee, if they state that name in the job advertisement, you put that here. You say, "Dear Professor so-and-so and members of the selection committee," or whatever you want to add there. And then you have a space under that greeting space, and you start your first paragraph with, "I am writing an application to the advertised position, blah, 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 at University of blah, blah, blah." You always start that way. It shows that you're paying attention to, you're not sending out boilerplate cover letters to all sorts of people. Nothing in that heading material may be left out. You need all of those elements. Sometimes people get a little sneaky. They want to trim and cut things out because they want to write more in their 2 pages. Do not be tempted to do that. This is stuff that is required. All right, 6-paragraph structure. Let's begin with paragraph 1. I'm writing in response to the ad for blah, blah, blah. Here's a brief introduction of me, the applicant. So after you say I'm writing in response, you're going to say I completed my MFA, or if you're a doctor, my doctorate at such and such college in such and such year. Currently, I'm blah, 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 and put in your position. If you're a grad student, you would put in, currently, I am an MFA candidate at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, or wherever you are, where I maintain an active studio practice and such, and I teach, I print, I shoot, whatever. You fill in the details of what your practice is. Additionally, and here you're going to put in a big accomplishment. You wrote a book, or you served on a national committee, or you have some other substantial grant that you got. You point out this is like your crowning achievement, your most recent big name thing that you've done. Maybe you won a residency somewhere, whatever. You mention that at the very end of your intro paragraph. Paragraph 2. This is where you showcase yourself as a professional with many achievements. So about this paragraph, you could list 3 residencies or 3 awards or 3 prestigious collections, or you could combine all of those depending on what you've achieved. This paragraph is a showcase of you as a professional artist or designer. And so an example of that would be, as I've exhibited works nationally and internationally, I explore such and such concepts and via my work in this medium. recent exhibitions span venues, including this, this, and this. Or if you don't have 3 great exhibitions, maybe you have an exhibition, a residency, and a grant, whatever. You're listing off your greatest hits here, the things that will make you stand out in a crowd. Paragraph 3 is your most recent completed body of work. So this is something you're able to reflect back on. It happened just recently. It explains why we should care about what you do. So an example of this would be my most recent body of work focused on this topic. It is entitled such and such, and it consists of 42 photographs or something. This body of work was developed during my recent residency at such and such, or you give a detail of how did you come to this? Why is it prestigious? Was it funded by a grant? Did you do it at a residency? Did you get an award for it? And through this and that, I am able to such and such, while also asking questions about this pressing contemporary topic. So what you're doing is you're creating a narrative in this paragraph where you explain, why are you relevant? Why should anyone care about anything that you're doing? So that's paragraph 3. And that's going to be followed by a very brief paragraph. It might only be a sentence or 2, where you're talking about what's your upcoming body of work. And you cannot skip this paragraph. Why? Because this shows the committee that not only did you just complete this awesome body of work, you've already got something queued up and ready to go. So you're busy, you're creating, you are engaged with contemporary topics, and this is just a simple, that was great, and now currently I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And this continues to build on the topics from that other great body of work, whatever you want that to tie in and feel like it's flowing. Okay, paragraph 5. Excuse me. All right, this is your teaching paragraph. And again, unfortunately, in academia, I'm going to take another glass of water. In academia, teaching is valued slightly less than the research. That is why we see, just like in the CV, this teaching information happens a little bit lower down in the order of things. So you want to, just like in any good essay, you want to tie it into the narrative of this letter. So you start with a sentence that says something like, all that great stuff I just talked about? Well, my teaching actually builds on that, or my teaching is inspired by that, or blah, blah, blah. You find a way to transition at the start of your teaching paragraph, and then you'll put in some sentences that explain about your teaching philosophy. We're going to go over that tomorrow in tomorrow's workshop. And you're going to want to mention class sizes, because this is going to help them envision, can you handle it at their university? Do they have big classes? Do they have small classes? Have you worked with teaching assistants before? All of this good stuff, you want to pack in little call outs to, I'm good at this, and I'm also good at this, and I've worked in this way. Here's a big, this isn't new, but it's one you have to call out moving forward. Online teaching experience. If you have even just a little bit of online teaching experience, you need to call it out here, because now online teaching experience is just as important as your range of class sizes. How many years have you been teaching? And that's important. They're going to want to know, how much heft do you have behind your experience? I think you could also talk about how you're constantly improving yourself. That shows you're engaged, you care about your skills in teaching. So you might mention, do you regularly attend workshops on your campus? Whatever, just something to show that you are invested in your own teaching excellence. All right, and then the final paragraph is the tailored paragraph. And this is the paragraph that shows you read the ad, you've done a little bit of research, you've certainly bothered to go to their website, and you're able to tie in your skills and experience to their needs. And so this could be something like an opportunity to teach at a program in blah, 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 and that values such and such. Take some language from their advertisement. Makes this position particularly appealing to me because blah, blah, blah. Mention some things about experience. Now be warned, this paragraph is another opportunity where sometimes people go off into their own sort of mushy emotional language that is just not valued, unfortunately, in academia. So you need to keep it dry. You need to keep it focused on examples. Show, don't tell. So don't tell us you're great. Show us you're great through all the different experiences that are going to be such a great fit at this institution you're applying to. Other things that are easy to call out in this tailored paragraph: location. Do a tiny bit of research. Is it located in a city? Does that city have a local gallery or museum that you could possibly tie your classes into? Whatever. You're not signing a contract or anything here. You're just proposing ideas of how you see them, you see where they're at, and you know that you're going to be really great at engaging with the community. So that is the tailored paragraph. And as you close the letter, you're going to say, I'm going to be at such and such conference or this event or that art fair or whatever. I would really enjoy speaking with you at that time. Or if you're unavailable, I can speak via phone, email, or whatever. What this does is it shows that you're engaged in the field by mentioning that first thing: I'll be presenting at, I'll be attending, I'll be doing whatever. And it shows that you are a peer, you're a contemporary, you're working at a professional level. So that's a really great way to close out the letter. Do not thank them for their consideration or time. Again, that lowers you in stature. Instead, just simply close with a simple phrase: I look forward to speaking with you soon, because we're adults, we're peers, we have equal respect for each other. So that is a good way to close the letter. All right, I know some of you, I've talked with many of you before, but if I haven't, this book is well worth, I think it's $12 or something, and you could probably get a used copy for even cheaper. She doesn't pay me to say this, but I have not run into a better resource. If you are serious about teaching in higher ed, you must read this book. She's very sarcastic. She's her tone is kind of intense, but what I like about it is that she just lays all the cards on the table, and you can decide how you want to approach the academic job market, but now you have all the information because she's very transparent about it. Also, if you're not unsure if you want to buy the book, check out her free blog. She has a lot of the content from the book in her blog, and that includes directions on the CV and directions on the cover letter. So check that out. Another good book I recommend, this one's a little bit more dated, but it also has other examples in it, which are valuable, and she has good insight for once you get the job as well. And then last but not least, I'm going to give a little plug to MCAD, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, continuing education. So one way you can build your CV is by teaching courses that set you apart from others, things that make you sparkle just a little bit, things that are a little bit different. And continuing ed is a great way to propose classes that are a little bit weird, a little bit different, a little bit special. And I'll give an example. I'm really interested in performative work, social practice, work that's experiential. And so I went to continuing ed and I said, can I teach a class on walking as artistic practice? Because it's something I'm passionate about. I think it's a little different. You don't see that every day. And they said yes. The only caveat was make sure you can get at least like 5 people to sign up for the class. And it worked like a dream. And now I'm in my second iteration of offering that class, and word is getting around. It's a very popular class. And you can do the very same thing for yourself. Think about how you can distinguish yourself from everybody else in the field, and then start small with a continuing ed class. And it doesn't have to be at MCAD, but this one, I just thought I'd put it out there because they are taking out for course ideas. So if you follow that tiny URL, github.com/mcad-ce-app, you can apply to teach there. So that's something to think about. All right, I am going to open up my navigation here and see. I've got two questions here. One is, can we have two email addresses? That's a really good question. You can have two email addresses. I don't know if I would recommend two email addresses, because that means you also have to sort of religiously monitor two email addresses. I'd probably only send out one for all of my professional applications. That way you're really streamlining your work, because when you're on the academic job market, it's like having a whole nother full-time job. So if you only have one email address you really have to monitor for these purposes, it's probably in your best interest. Let's see here. I'm going to pull out this. Let's see here. Okay. How about in the local newspaper? I think, and feel free to clarify who asked this. This is from Sharon. Is this about a bibliography question? I'll let that set there. So Sharon, if you want to clarify that. Oh, publishing. Are you allowed to publish in a local newspaper? Absolutely. If you're able to get published in a local newspaper, more power to you. That's fantastic. And it's a great way to start, because publishing can be really hard to get your foot in the door. If you're able to get something published in the local newspaper, do it. That's wonderful. Next up, I've got something about the terminology I've been wondering for a while. What's the main difference between saying MFA student and MFA candidate? Great question. There is no difference. It's just two phrases for the same thing. I think sometimes people use the word candidate because it might sound a little bit more prestigious, but really there's no difference at all. When you're a student in an MFA program, you are an MFA candidate, and the degree is awarded to the candidate upon graduation. So good question. All right, next I have, any recommendations on how do we detail shows and funding canceled due to COVID? Great question. And you absolutely should keep those items on your CV and in your cover letter. What you can do though, and I've seen this mentioned in several online forums, is in parentheses or in brackets after the listing, and I have a couple of these on one of my CVs or resumes, is canceled due to COVID. And everybody knows what that means now. So you don't have to worry like, oh, is this professional or not? It's rapidly becoming very recognized. So that's a great question. Keep them on there. Don't delete those wonderful opportunities that you earned. You earned them, so keep them on there. Let's see here. Is there a page limit for the CV, or should everything be on there? This is a really good question. CVs, like the longer you're a scholar, they just get longer and longer and longer. They become quite unwieldy. I do go in and do a little bit of housekeeping on mine. And when I'm applying directly to a committee, I let it be pretty long. I do go back occasionally and take off like some of the less significant ones, the ones that just aren't as prestigious. I slowly, over time, as I like earn more things, more CV lines, I take the less significant ones off. But it is okay for it to get quite long. The exception to that is when I put my CV online, sometimes, or an artist CV, or sorry, artist resume, I trim it down, and I usually focus for those online documents on about the last 5 years. Unless there's something really glowing, then I do leave that on there, but most of the rest of it, I trim it up so it's about a 5-year summary, just because there's sort of a cult of the recent in academia and in the art world. People, you often see on applications like, please feel free to send in something made in the last year or the last 2 years, and it's just sort of the cult of the recent is what I call it. But no, to answer the question, there is not a page limit for the CV. And it's okay if you've been working for a while. The CV, I see 25-page CVs all the time. That's very normal. And if you're just starting and your CV is really short, don't beat yourself up. It'll grow before you know it. They just balloon. They grow like dandelions. So good. Any other questions? Anyone? When, let me see, when is it no longer appropriate to keep info and experience from school? I'm wondering about keeping or leaving things off from grad school. Great question. So I think this brings up the idea of that cult of the recent. I think I'm going to throw out a vague number here. I would say for at least 5 years after grad school, it's totally fine to leave that grad school stuff on there. It's expected. There's no shame in that. I think once you start to get beyond that window, you really have to evaluate each of those grad school items for their heft, like how much merit do they hold, and then you can slowly start to like slough them off as you find new, more impressive things to put on instead. But certainly for at least 5 years or so, I think it would be completely appropriate. Yeah, I think that's the answer I'm going to stick with there. All right, next question I have. If you have many years of professional experience and you're moving into higher ed, for example, you're a part-time grad student, how do you show your years of practical experience? That's a great question. So what I would probably do, depending on the prestige of those years of professional experience, I would very likely start off with the education, put in your professional appointments, and this is the ones that are academic related. And then I'd probably, if that professional experience that you're talking about is recognizable, it has heft, I might even stick that above the exhibitions and awards, depending. Like I think you need to make a call based on how do you perceive that? Is the professional experience something that really sets you out from the crowd? And if it does, then go ahead, stick it above the grants, stick it above awards, stick it above your exhibition record. So, and anyone else? Anyone else here? I think we've reached the end of our submitted questions, and I want to be respectful of time. It's now a little after 5:45, but if there are more questions, I'm happy to stick around. Anyone? Oh, here's one. Oh, that's just thank you. All right. A couple thank yous. That's great. Well, thank you all for coming. This was such a pleasure to share with you all. Tomorrow and on Thursday, we have additional brief professional practices workshops just like this. There will be handouts, and I will share the link. What I'm going to do is use our registration list. I get a spreadsheet of everybody who registered and attended, and I will email the two templates, the template and the CV sample, and a link to this presentation so you can click on those embedded links. So, excellent. And thank you. All right, thank you all. It is such a pleasure. Have a great evening.